Las Vegas still knows how to look alive. The lights are on, the fountains still rise, the hotel towers still sell the same old promise that this city can turn money into excitement. But something feels different in 2026. More visitors are walking the Strip with a kind of hesitation. They are still taking the photos, still stepping into the casinos, still trying to have the Vegas trip they imagined. Then, the bill arrives. The room fees stack up. The food costs more than expected. The gambling floor feels tighter. And by the end of the trip, a lot of people leave with the same quiet reaction. That was not worth it. And that is where the real problem begins. Because Las Vegas does not collapse all at once. It weakens when people stop feeling amazed, when the value disappears before the marketing does, when tourists keep showing up but leave more disappointed than entertained. So what changed? Why are so many people walking away from the most famous tourist machine in America feeling drained, overcharged, and strangely underwhelmed? Las Vegas was never selling hotel rooms alone. It was selling a complete machine, a concentrated entertainment corridor built on the idea that people would travel across the country and often across the world to spend heavily in one place. The Strip became the center of that model. A few miles of mega resorts, casino floors, arena events, luxury retail, celebrity restaurants, conventions, clubs, pools, and non-stop spectacle. Over time, billions of dollars were poured into keeping that machine attractive. Every renovation, every new tower, every branded dining concept, every premium experience carried the same assumption, that demand would stay strong enough for Vegas to charge more tomorrow than it charged yesterday. That logic made sense for a long time. Vegas had something few markets could match. It had scale, density, and a kind of emotional momentum. Visitors were not just booking a bed, they were buying access to an experience that felt bigger than daily life. You could justify the airfare, the expensive room, the long walks, the resort fees, even the inflated food prices, because the trip still felt special. For operators, that created an unusually powerful business formula. Pack the calendar, push premium pricing, keep people on property, and turn tourism into revenue from every direction, not just gambling. That was the promise behind modern Las Vegas. Not simply volume, but high value per visitor. The problem is that this model depends on one fragile thing. The guest has to believe the overall experience is worth the total cost. Not one cost, the total cost. And that is where expectations may have started drifting away from reality. As prices rose across rooms, dining, parking, entertainment, and gaming, the city kept acting as if the emotional payoff would remain untouched, as if people would absorb the friction and still leave impressed, still eager to come back, still willing to spend more on the next trip. But once that feeling weakens, the scale of Vegas stops being an advantage and starts becoming a very expensive system to feed. The financial picture is where the story becomes harder to dismiss. Las Vegas welcomed 38.5 million visitors in 2025. That was a 7.5% drop from the year before. And even in early 2026, the numbers still looked conflicted rather than strong. February visitor volume reached about 3.03 million, up 2.1% year-over-year. But the year-to-date total was still down 0.2%. Hotel occupancy in February came in at 81.7%, with strip occupancy at 85%. On the surface, that sounds healthy. But the average daily room rate was $193.23 citywide, and strip ADR was $207.28. In other words, Vegas is still filling a lot of rooms, but it is doing so at a price point that keeps pushing the value question back onto the guest. That is why revenue can look stable while the experience feels weaker. In February, Las Vegas Strip gaming revenue rose 0.9% from the same month a year earlier. But the year-to-date Strip total was down 5.7%. Clark County gaming revenue told a similar story, up slightly for the month, but down 4.2% for the year-to-date. That matters, because gaming still tells you whether people are leaning into the trip or pulling back once they arrive. If room prices go up while gaming spend softens, the city may still generate cash, but the emotional core of the visit starts to thin out. People are not saying Vegas is cheap and exciting. They are saying it is expensive, crowded, and somehow less rewarding than it used to be. The balance sheet might not show that first. The customer does. The pressure becomes even clearer when you look at the companies that dominate the Strip. MG Resorts said its Las Vegas Strip resorts generated $8.4 billion in net revenue in 2025. That was down 4% from the prior year. Segment-adjusted EBITDA fell from $3.1 billion to $2.9 billion, an 8% decline. That is not a collapse, but it is a meaningful compression in a market that depends on scale and pricing power. Caesars told a similar story. Its Las Vegas segment produced $1.728 billion in adjusted EBITDA in 2025. That was down 8.6% from the comparable adjusted figure a year earlier. Caesars also ended the year with $11.9 billion in debt outstanding. So even when Las Vegas still looks full on camera, the major operators are dealing with a more delicate equation underneath. Less room for error, less room for softness, and much more pressure to keep monetizing every visitor. And that brings us to the quiet contradiction at the center of the city. Vegas can still look busy and still be under strain at the same time. High ADR helps protect revenue. Strong weekends help occupancy. Convention traffic still supports the calendar. But if the guest arrives with a tighter budget, gambles less, questions the bill more, and leaves less eager to return, then the machine is not as healthy as the headline numbers suggest. Even the public market hints at that caution. As of April 9, 2026, MGM shares were trading around $37.1, while Caesars traded around $26.85. Those are not numbers that prove a crisis by themselves. What they suggest is something else. Investors are still willing to believe in Las Vegas. They are just not valuing it like an effortless growth story anymore. What makes this more serious is that the weakness is not hitting every part of Las Vegas equally. Conventions have held up better than leisure travel, which tells you the problem is not simply that people stopped coming to the city for any reason at all. In 2025, Las Vegas hosted 6 million convention attendees, nearly matching the prior year, even as total visitation fell to 38.5 million. That matters because conventions are scheduled, budgeted, and often paid for by companies. Leisure trips are different. They are emotional purchases. They depend on households feeling comfortable enough to spend freely on a place that is supposed to feel exciting, indulgent, and worth the premium. Right now, that is exactly where the pressure is showing. Reuters reported that Las Vegas experienced its sharpest annual visitor decline outside the pandemic, while analysts pointed out that other major vacation markets, including Orlando, Honolulu, and Disneyland, were not seeing the same kind of pullback. That suggests this is not just a broad tourism problem. It is also a Las Vegas problem. The broader economy helps explain why. When inflation stays elevated, travelers become more selective, They shorten trips, skip extras, or choose destinations where the spending feels more predictable. Las Vegas is vulnerable because it often turns one purchase into 5. The airfare leads to the room leads to resort fees, parking, food, drinks, shows, transportation, and gambling losses. If the visitor starts calculating instead of relaxing, the model weakens fast. Reuters also noted that passenger traffic at Harry Reid International Airport fell about 6% in 2025, and that airlines scheduled about 7% fewer seats into Las Vegas for the first quarter of 2026. That is not the pattern of a market with unlimited momentum. It is the pattern of a destination adjusting to softer demand. Then there is the international layer, and Vegas cannot easily replace it. International travelers matter because they tend to stay longer and spend more once they arrive. But the United States saw a 6% drop in foreign visitors in 2025, even as global tourism spending continued to rise. In other words, people are still traveling. They are just not choosing the United States at the same rate. Las Vegas feels that more sharply than many domestic destinations, because it depends on high-spending, long-haul visitors to support premium pricing. Reuters also reported that Canadian carriers cut capacity into Las Vegas by about 30% for the first quarter of 2026, reflecting weaker cross-border demand. So the market context is not one clean shock. It is several pressures stacking together at once: cautious consumers, weaker leisure demand, softer air service, and a global travel environment where Vegas is no longer the automatic choice it once felt like. The core strategic flaw is not that Las Vegas became expensive. It is that Las Vegas kept raising the cost of the trip while slowly weakening the feeling that the trip was exceptional. That sounds similar, but it is not the same thing. People will tolerate friction when the payoff feels memorable. They will forgive the walk, the fees, the overpriced drink, the crowded check-in line, even a bad gambling session, if the overall visit still feels bigger than the bill. Vegas used to understand that balance instinctively. In 2026, the city looks more like it is optimized to capture revenue at every step. Rooms, parking, food, premium seating, paid attractions, nightlife, tighter gambling conditions. One charge by itself is manageable. The accumulation is what breaks the spell. That model becomes even riskier when the customer base starts narrowing. Reuters reported that the weakness has been most visible among middle-income leisure travelers, while higher-income guests have remained more resilient. The LVCVA visitor profile shows why that matters. In 2025, about 81% of visitors still gambled, and the average gaming budget among gamblers rose to about $848.5. But average food and drink spending fell to about $582.86, down from $615.07 in 2024. Average per-night lodging spend among non-package, non-comp hotel guests also slipped to about $174.52, down from $179.1 a year earlier. That is a warning sign. Visitors are still participating, but they are trimming around the edges. So the real mistake may be this: Vegas increasingly behaves as if it can replace broad appeal with premium extraction, as if fewer visitors spending more can fully offset the loss of visitors who once filled the restaurants, bought the lower-tier show tickets, stayed midweek, and gave the city its depth. That works for a while, especially when convention traffic is steady and weekends remain busy, but it leaves the destination more exposed. Once value-oriented travelers begin pulling back, the market does not just lose volume, it loses flexibility. Reuters noted that properties such as Luxor and Excalibur have already leaned on discounts and perks to defend demand. That suggests the city itself understands the strain, even if it rarely says the deeper part out loud. In that sense, price fatigue is only the visible symptom. The underlying flaw is that Las Vegas has spent years training visitors to think harder about the math. And once a leisure destination pushes people into spreadsheet mode, some of the magic is already gone. The city is not failing because nobody wants entertainment. It is under pressure because too many guests no longer believe the total experience justifies the total spend. That is a dangerous shift for any tourism economy. For Las Vegas, it cuts straight into the foundation of the business model itself. The stress inside Las Vegas does not always arrive as a dramatic headline. Most of the time, it shows up in quieter ways. A resort that still feels busy on Friday night can feel noticeably thinner by Monday afternoon. Reuters described it clearly. The peaks are still there, but the valleys are getting softer. That matters because weekdays are what keep the machine stable. They fill rooms that support payroll. They keep restaurants moving. They keep casino floors active. And when that middle of the week starts fading, the city can still look alive from a distance while becoming less efficient underneath. That softness is already changing behavior on the ground. Strip hotels have leaned more heavily on seasonal offers, dining credits, and added perks to protect demand. CoStar data cited by Reuters showed that midweek revenue per available room fell about 11% in 2025. Placer.ai data also showed that the weekday share of Strip foot traffic has been declining, while the weekend share has been rising. That is a meaningful operational signal.
It means Las Vegas is becoming more dependent on compressed bursts of demand, instead of a healthier spread across the week. And once a city built on constant circulation starts leaning on narrower windows of activity, pressure builds fast behind the scenes. You can also see the strain in the major operators themselves. MGM said fourth quarter net revenue at its Las Vegas Strip resorts fell 3%, while segment-adjusted EBITDA fell 4%. For the full year, Las Vegas Strip revenue was down 4%, and segment-adjusted EBITDA was down 8%. Caesars reported a similar pattern. Its fourth quarter Las Vegas same-store net revenue fell 3.4%, and same-store adjusted EBITDA for the segment fell 6.5%. Those are not catastrophic numbers, but they do suggest that operators are working harder to produce less operating leverage than before. That usually leads to tighter staffing discipline, tighter marketing decisions, and more pressure on every department to do more with less. And then there is the human side, which often detects stress before investors do. Reuters reported that workers are already feeling it through reduced tips, disappearing extra shifts, and stagnant wages against a higher local cost of living. Union officials described the slowdown not as a wave of big layoffs, at least not yet, but as vanishing hours that hit part-time and on-call workers first. That is often how strain begins in a tourism economy, not with one shocking collapse. With smaller signs, fewer hours, thinner casino floors, a quieter midweek, managers trying to protect margins without saying too plainly that the old rhythm is starting to slip. Las Vegas is not ignoring the slowdown. It is already responding in the ways a mature tourism machine usually does. Hotels are using discounts, bundled perks, and selective price cuts to protect demand, especially at the value end of the Strip. Reuters noted that properties such as Luxor and Excalibur have leaned on cheaper room offers and added benefits to keep leisure travelers booking. That can help fill rooms in the short term. It can soften the sticker shock just enough to prevent a canceled trip. But it also reveals something important. When a destination built on premium pricing starts leaning harder on visible promotions, it is often trying to defend volume without fully resetting the underlying value equation. The second response has been to rely more heavily on events, conventions, and calendar-driven demand. That is the more sophisticated fix, and in some ways, the more effective one. Convention attendance held near 6 million in 2025, even as total visitation fell, which means Las Vegas still has a powerful engine for bringing people into the city. Major concerts, sports, and trade shows can also create sharp bursts of spending that protect weekends and compress demand into high-yielding windows. The problem is that this strategy
stabilizes traffic more than it restores enthusiasm. It fills the calendar. It does not necessarily rebuild the feeling among ordinary leisure visitors that Vegas has become a better value for money. There is also a quieter attempt to broaden the base by pulling harder on local and regional demand. But that solution has limits for the Strip. The Las Vegas locals gaming market is large enough to matter, and Red Rock Resorts said its Las Vegas operations grew 2.9% in 2025, with adjusted EBITDA up 4.2%. That suggests spending has not disappeared. It has shifted toward properties that serve repeat local customers with easier access, lower friction, and a more practical value proposition. So when Strip resorts try to chase locals more aggressively, they are stepping into a market that already functions by very different rules. That may help around the edges. It does not fully solve the Strip's premium leisure problem. And that is why most of these solutions look more like pressure management than true repair. Discounts can protect occupancy. Events can protect peak demand. Locals can provide some cushion. But none of those responses directly answer the central issue, which is that too many visitors now question whether the overall Vegas experience still justifies the total spend. Until that perception changes, the city is mostly treating symptoms, not the cause. It is trying to optimize around disappointment, rather than remove the reason disappointment is happening in the first place. That may buy time. It does not necessarily restore trust. Las Vegas is not disappearing. It is still one of the most recognizable tourism brands in the world. The real question is whether the version of Las Vegas that dominated for years can keep working under a different economic mood. For a long time, the city benefited from a powerful assumption that demand would keep absorbing higher prices, that visitors would tolerate more fees, more friction, and a more expensive overall trip, because the experience still felt singular. But the latest numbers suggest that assumption is no longer as secure as it once seemed. Visitor volume fell in 2025, air traffic softened, midweek demand weakened, and even when major operators kept generating billions in revenue, margins still came under pressure. That does not mean the city is finished. It means the old formula may be losing efficiency. And if that is true, then this story is bigger than one bad year. It becomes a warning about the long-term sustainability of any casino market that depends on charging more while giving customers fewer reasons to feel amazed. So what happens next if tourists keep coming to Las Vegas?